It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day when people are busy with their own routines and no one expects anything unusual to happen. But that afternoon quickly turned into something unforgettable when a local eyewitness claimed to have seen something that shook the entire community. According to this person, Pastor Aaron Williams, the man respected by so many and known for his powerful sermons, was spotted in broad daylight walking side by side with a woman. But here's where the shock came in. The woman was not the First Lady, his wife, who has always been seen as his strong support system. At first, this claim sounded unbelievable. People couldn't accept it easily because Pastor Aaron had always presented himself as a man of deep faith, loyalty, and integrity. He was someone who constantly spoke about commitment, family values, and setting an example for others. The thought of him being with another woman felt completely out of character, and for many, it was almost impossible to believe. But the eyewitness described the situation with such detail that it left people unsettled. The way Pastor Aaron and the woman interacted didn't look like a random meeting or a casual conversation. Instead, it seemed personal, private, and a little too comfortable for anyone to ignore. Within hours, the news of this sighting spread quietly among community members. People who heard about it were caught between two feelings: disbelief and curiosity. Could it really be true? Or was it just a misunderstanding, an innocent meeting taken the wrong way? No one had a clear answer, but the very idea of their pastor being seen with someone other than his wife in such a way was enough to spark whispers and raise questions that no one was prepared to face. This was the beginning of a story that no one in the community thought they would ever hear. The quiet whispers began almost immediately after the story of Pastor Aaron's sighting started to circulate. At first, it was only a handful of people discussing it behind closed doors, lowering their voices as if speaking too loudly would make the rumor more real. But as hours turned into days, the whispers grew louder and more public. Small conversations began to take place in grocery stores, outside the church, and even during casual meetups among friends. Everyone seemed to have their own opinion, and the community quickly found itself divided. Some members of the congregation refused to believe it. For them, Pastor Aaron was a man of honor, a figure they trusted not only with their faith, but also with their personal struggles. They argued that the entire situation must have been a misunderstanding, perhaps just a friendly interaction taken out of context. They reminded others of how the pastor had always stood by his wife during difficult times, presenting himself as a role model for marriage and faithfulness. It's impossible, they said. He would never betray his family or the church like that. But not everyone was convinced. Others felt uneasy and claimed that this wasn't the first time such rumors had come up. They remembered vague conversations from the past, whispers of Pastor Aaron being seen in unusual situations that had never been fully explained. Those incidents were brushed aside at the time because there was no proof, but now, with a fresh story in circulation, the doubts started to resurface. People began to say things like, "If there was nothing to hide, why does it keep happening?" The debate spread across social media too. A blurry photo claimed to show Pastor Aaron with the mysterious woman, though it wasn't clear enough to confirm. Still, for many people, the picture was enough to spark further suspicion. The comments section under the post turned into a battlefield, one side defending their pastor with passion, while the other side insisted the truth was finally starting to come out. In just a matter of days, the atmosphere around the church changed. Instead of conversations about faith and community, people were now focused on the possibility of scandal. It was as if a shadow had fallen over the pastor's image, and no matter how much some tried to deny it, the whispers refused to die down. As the new whispers spread like wildfire, people's minds began to drift back to things they had once ignored. It was almost as if this new incident had opened a locked door, and behind it were old memories and unspoken doubts that had been kept hidden for years. Slowly, the past started resurfacing. Some members of the congregation recalled a moment a year ago when Pastor Aaron had been spotted leaving a late-night dinner with someone who wasn't his wife. At the time, people brushed it off, assuming it was a meeting with a church donor or a colleague. Nothing more was ever said about it, and the story faded into the background. But now, with the current rumors in the air, that old memory suddenly didn't feel so innocent anymore. During a church conference 2 years earlier, a few attendees had whispered about seeing him laughing and sitting closely with another woman in the lobby of a hotel. No picture surfaced, and without evidence, the topic died quickly. People had given him the benefit of the doubt, believing he could never do something that would damage his reputation or hurt his family. But with the present situation unfolding, those vague recollections seemed far less easy to dismiss. The most unsettling part was how these stories, though scattered and never confirmed, seemed to share a pattern. Each one involved Pastor Aaron being seen with someone other than his wife, always in circumstances that could be explained away but never fully proven. And while no single story had ever been strong enough to cause a scandal, the accumulation of them created a sense of unease that grew heavier with every passing day. For some, it was a moment of betrayal. They began asking themselves if they had been blind all along, refusing to see the truth that had been right in front of them. Others felt torn between their loyalty to their pastor and the undeniable feeling that too many coincidences had piled up. The once solid trust people had in him was now cracking, piece by piece, as the shadows of the past blended with the uncertainty of the present. The community could no longer pretend these rumors never existed. They were back, louder and stronger than before, and they demanded to be answered. As the rumors continued to spread, the weight of the situation began to press heavily on the congregation. For many of Pastor Aaron's followers, this was not just gossip about a man in the community. It was a direct attack on the person they trusted with their faith, their marriages, and even their personal struggles. The impact was emotional, deep, and difficult to put into words. Some church members remained fiercely loyal. They reminded everyone of the countless times Pastor Aaron had been there in moments of crisis, leading prayers during funerals, offering counseling for troubled marriages, and guiding young people away from destructive choices. To them, the very idea that he could be involved in something so dishonorable was unbearable. They defended him passionately, saying things like, "He's been a father figure to us," or "This has to be a misunderstanding, because the man we know would never live a double life." Their voices were strong, but behind them was a hint of fear that maybe the rumors held more truth than they wanted to admit. On the other hand, a different group of followers couldn't ignore the pattern of stories anymore. They felt angry, disappointed, and betrayed. Many of them had shaped their lives based on the teachings he preached every Sunday, sermons about loyalty, honesty, and walking in the light. If the man who spoke those words couldn't live by them, what did that mean for everything they had believed? Some even admitted to feeling foolish, questioning whether they had placed too much trust in someone who may not have deserved it. The tension was visible inside the church. Services that once carried an atmosphere of unity and joy now felt heavy, filled with silent stares and unspoken questions. People sat in the pews wondering not only about the truth of the rumors, but also about what it meant for their spiritual journey. For some, faith in Pastor Aaron was tied to their faith in God, and separating the two was proving painfully difficult. Conversations after services no longer revolved around scripture or community projects. Instead, they were filled with speculation, doubt, and frustration. The whispers had transformed into full debates, and the church that once stood as a place of healing and strength now felt divided and fragile. For many, it was not just about what Pastor Aaron might have done. It was about the ripple effect of broken trust. As the whispers grew into debates, and the debates turned into full-blown arguments, everyone waited for one thing: Pastor Aaron's response. The community hoped that he would step forward, clarify the situation, and put an end to the growing storm. But to everyone's surprise, days passed and no statement came from him. His silence began to feel louder than any rumor. At first, many assumed he was simply taking time to gather his thoughts. After all, a leader like him would surely address something so serious. But as each day went by without a word, people began to interpret his silence in different ways. For his loyal supporters, the quiet was a sign of dignity. They believed he was choosing not to engage with gossip, refusing to lower himself to the level of rumor and speculation. He doesn't owe anyone an explanation, they said. His life speaks for itself. But for those already filled with doubt, his refusal to speak only added fuel to the fire. If he was innocent, they argued, why wouldn't he clear his name immediately? Why let people believe? Worst, to them, his silence looked less like strength and more like guilt. Every day without an answer made the possibility of the rumors being true feel stronger. Inside the church, the atmosphere grew heavier. When Pastor Aaron preached, his words were powerful as always, but the congregation listened differently now. Every pause in his sermon, every moment of hesitation, felt loaded with hidden meaning. Some people searched his expressions for clues, wondering if guilt was written across his face. Others chose to close their eyes and ignore the tension, clinging to the man they had always trusted. Meanwhile, the First Lady's silence spoke volumes of its own. Her calm presence in the front pew gave nothing away, but her lack of any public statement kept the mystery alive. Was she standing by her husband in quiet support, or was she suffering in silence? No one knew, and her composed demeanor only deepened the questions swirling in people's minds. The lack of answers left the community in limbo. The silence created more noise than words ever could, and the longer it stretched on, the harder it became for people to hold on to certainty. For some, the waiting felt unbearable, as if they were trapped in a story that refused to give them an ending. What began as a whisper inside the church and a few posts on social media soon exploded into something much larger. Local bloggers and online news outlets picked up the story, giving it headlines that were far more dramatic than the original rumor. Phrases like "scandal in the pulpit" and "pastor spotted with mystery woman" began circulating online, and once the media entered the picture, there was no turning back. Small community pages turned into major discussion boards. Every detail, whether verified or not, was analyzed, twisted, and spread like wildfire. A blurry photo of Pastor Aaron walking with the woman was shared again and again, with captions that made the situation look worse than it already was. The picture alone was not enough to prove anything, but in the hands of the media, it became the centerpiece of a scandal that was now attracting attention far beyond the local community. For many of his followers, this was devastating. They had hoped the situation would remain private, something only their congregation would discuss. But now strangers who had never even stepped inside the church were giving their opinions, mocking the pastor, and questioning his character. Every new headline chipped away at the dignity the church once carried. Even more painful was the way the story began to affect the pastor's family. Though the First Lady kept her silence, reporters and bloggers speculated about her feelings, writing articles as if they knew what was happening inside her heart. Some suggested she was standing by her husband quietly, while others painted her as a victim of betrayal. Neither side knew the truth, but the endless stories only added to the chaos. Through it all, Pastor Aaron remained silent, refusing to respond to the growing media storm. His silence, which had once seemed like patience, now appeared to many as avoidance. The public wanted clarity, but instead, they got headlines that grew more sensational by the day. For the first time, even some of his most loyal supporters admitted they felt uneasy. The situation had spiraled out of control. What started as a single sighting in broad daylight had now become a full-scale scandal, with the church standing in the center of unwanted national attention. The pressure was mounting, and the longer the silence continued, the greater the damage became, not only to Pastor Aaron's reputation, but to the very foundation of the community that had always believed in him. As the days turned into weeks, the scandal surrounding Pastor Aaron Williams refused to fade. Instead, it lingered like a storm cloud, hanging over the church, the community, and every person who had once placed their trust in him. The silence from the pastor had now become the loudest part of the story. Each passing Sunday, as he stood on the pulpit, his words of faith and hope carried a weight they never had before, not because of what he said, but because of what he refused to say. People inside the congregation were desperate for answers. Some pleaded with him in private to address the rumors directly, to speak the truth and put an end to the endless speculation. Others had already made up their minds, convinced that silence itself was proof of guilt. Outside the church walls, media outlets kept the story alive, publishing new angles, inviting experts to weigh in, and feeding an audience that was eager for drama. And yet, despite all the noise, Pastor Aaron remained still, calm on the outside, but unreadable to those around him. The mysterious woman's identity was never revealed publicly, and without that key detail, the story stayed incomplete. Was it a misunderstanding, a friend, a colleague, or was it something more? No one knew.